When the doctor informed him that your mother's life may only have 48 hours left, he chose not to rush to the hospital. Instead, he took his wife on a little getaway. Upon returning home, a note stuck to his mother's front door transformed his life entirely. In a quiet corner of a small town in Connecticut, where the chilly winter winds flow freely, an elderly woman named Evelyn lived a solitary life. Evelyn, 72 years old, had lost her husband to illness 2 decades prior, and since then had lived all alone. Once upon a time, she had managed a quaint little general store. On the shelves were penny candies, school supplies, items that neighborhood kids would eagerly come to buy with their quarters. The income was never substantial, but to Evelyn, it was work she took much pride in. It was more than 20 years back when she had to let go of that store, the year her son, Michael, was accepted into a university in New York City. "I want him to study without any worries," Evelyn wished sincerely. And with that, she closed the store without hesitation, dipping into her modest savings to support Michael's tuition, living expenses, and rent. There were days she skipped lunch, altered old clothes to extend their life, and through it all, she worked believing in her son's bright future. During those years, a worrisome sensation began to creep into her body: palpitations, breathlessness, cold sweats. She was diagnosed with a heart condition, a serious ailment affecting the heart's function. Yet, "I think it's better if I keep this to myself. It would only worry Michael," she reasoned, and for 10 years she told no one, facing her illness quietly with monthly hospital visits and prescribed medication. Her monthly pension was minimal. In spite of that, the savings she had painstakingly set aside grew, reaching $35,000. Perhaps someday this will help Michael, she believed, always leaving it untouched. Evelyn lived in a 40-year-old wooden single-story house, where cracks began appearing in the walls, and there was a small leak at the kitchen tap. Nonetheless, this house was where she and her husband once lived together and raised their son, full of precious memories. The marks on the posts where Michael's height had been etched with pencil were still visible. Even the creaking floors were, to Evelyn, reminiscent of a lullaby. Living there alone, every morning Evelyn would say a quiet prayer at her small household altar, a tradition she held dear. "Dear, Michael is doing well and working hard. I'm still here, watching over everything," she would whisper. In recent years, communication with Michael became sparse, maybe a phone call once a month. Some years, he didn't even come home for Christmas. But Evelyn never voiced any complaints. "Kids today are just busy, that's all. As long as he's healthy and happy, that's enough for me," she'd say, often looking through photos of Michael as a child, holding the memories tenderly to her heart. This story tells of Evelyn's quiet, yet profoundly loving life. She didn't know that soon, the last phone call would change everything. March 15, 2025, at a hospital in Hartford, where Evelyn spent her days gazing gently out the window, soaking in the comforting sunlight. The doctor's announcement that morning was both gentle and incredibly real. "Mrs. Anderson, the situation with your heart has rapidly worsened. You likely have less than 48 hours. The doctor's voice seemed miles away. Even the nurse's concerned gaze felt dreamlike. "It seems the time has truly come," Evelyn thought, nodding slowly. For years she battled this heart disease, quietly enduring it with medications and regular checkups. She had braced herself for this moment long ago, but there remained one thing left undone. She hadn't yet spoken her final words to her son. Borrowing the hospital's phone, she dialed a number she knew by heart. The phone rang once, twice, and then he picked up. "Hello?" In the background, she could hear the soothing rush of waves and the chirping of birds, a tranquil ambience that seemed worlds apart from her current reality. "Michael? It's Mom. I'm sorry to call like this. The doctors say I might not have more than a couple of days left." Her voice was steady, delivering the news as calmly as possible. There was a pause, and then his response came, surprisingly composed. "Oh, I see. I'm actually at a resort right now. It's Janet's birthday today, you know. We're celebrating." Evelyn caught her breath, feeling foolish for having hoped otherwise. "Well, Janet has a bit of a migraine today, and it's tough to rush back like this. Do you think the doctors could extend things a little?" That was Michael's answer. She could faintly hear the clinking of glasses and someone laughing on the other end. "Oh, okay, I understand," Evelyn replied, placing the receiver back on the cradle gently. When the nurse returned, Evelyn wore her familiar gentle smile, as if nothing had changed. That night, after turning off the hospital lights and closing the curtains, Evelyn sat up slowly. She retrieved a pen and a notepad from her nightstand's drawer and began writing a letter with quiet determination. Her hand trembled ever so slightly, but each word flowed with clarity and sincerity. "To Michael, I've always wanted nothing but your happiness, but it seems I'll face my final moments on my own. Perhaps that's just life." Once finished, she tucked the envelope close to her heart and pressed the nurse call button to contact the hospital's office. "Sorry for disturbing you at this hour. If possible, could you reach out to my attorney?" Her voice, though gentle, carried a note of resolution. Later that night, a lawyer visited the hospital's meeting room to confer quietly with Evelyn Anderson. She had decided to donate her entire estate, approximately $35,000 in savings and her 40-year-old home, to a local children's shelter. And one more thing. She penned a brief message on a piece of paper, written on yellow paper. The words were simple yet poignant. "To Michael, I've left the house and savings to children who, like me, needed a place. There's a special family waiting for you. The key is where you'd always find it. Love, Mom." In that small town on the outskirts of New York, Evelyn's choices echoed through Michael's heart, a quiet legacy of unconditional love. It was the last message she asked to be placed on the door. The hospital room was dark. Outside the window, the stars twinkled peacefully in a sky sprinkled with the whispers of the universe. March 15, 2025, just after 9 p.m. In a sophisticated resort restaurant in New York, glasses of red wine gently swayed to the harmonious notes of a piano, adding a melodious hue to the birthday dinner being celebrated there. Meanwhile, in a hospital room in Hartford, Connecticut, Evelyn Anderson sat quietly under the soft glow of a bedside lamp, her hand steadily moving across the paper. "If tomorrow never comes, I can't complain to anyone. But as a mother, there are simply things I must leave behind." The letter spanned 3 pages of stationery. It began with the gentle introduction, "To Jason," written in her softest script. It was not a letter of grievances. On the contrary, each sentence started with, "Thank you," and ended with, "A wish. I was truly happy when you were born. Please live happily with your wife. I take pride in having been your mother until the very end." After finishing the letter, Evelyn pushed the nurse call button and asked the nurse to connect her once more to the law office. After midnight, the same lawyer quietly appeared in the hospital's conference room. From the thin pocket of his blazer, he pulled out documents, a revised version of the will they had discussed recently. It stated, cash of approximately $35,000, donated to a local childcare facility. Real estate, a 40-year-old home in the suburbs, gifted to the same facility. Other possessions, no specific allocation. When the lawyer indicated where to sign, Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she firmly placed her name there. "Perhaps this will give it a bit of meaning," she said with a smile, bowing her head gently in appreciation to the lawyer. After he departed, Evelyn made another request to the nurse station. She asked for paper and tape to place on her front door at home. They provided a yellow letter-sized piece of paper and some round masking tape. Evelyn slowly wrote a message in the center of that paper. "To Jason, you no longer need to worry about Mom. This house, the money, it's not needed by you any longer, right? I only wanted to be a mother the best way I knew how until the end. The key is left in that usual place. Love, Mom." She placed the paper in an envelope and asked hospital staff, "Please make sure to put this on the front door tomorrow." Having concluded all her arrangements, Evelyn returned to bed, her eyes turning to the window above. The moonlight gently threaded through a break in the clouds. Bathing in its soft luminance, she reached for a photo nestled over her chest. It was a picture from Jason's elementary school days, capturing the exact moment he broke through the tape at a school sports event. His face was flushed red, arms triumphantly raised. An exuberant smile spread wide across his face. On the back of the picture, Evelyn had inscribed years ago, "To protect this smile for life. Mom." Her fingertips traced those words as she clutched the photo against her heart, inhaling deeply and calmly. And then, at 3:13 a.m., the small alarm on the nurse station monitor went off. When the attending nurse arrived and gently called out, Evelyn Anderson did not respond. She lay there with a serene smile on her face, the picture tenderly secured above her heart, and so it seemed as if those hands were gently and warmly attempting to cradle someone until the very last moment, closed in kindness. On March 17, 2025, at 10:00 a.m., under a slightly heavy and somber sky, Michael Yamada stood in front of his family home in Connecticut. He'd just returned from a trip that took him from New York City. Weighed down by the bittersweet air of the journey, he didn't have the key, but he noticed something tucked onto the front door, a piece of paper that caught his eye. It resembled yellow construction paper, the kind used in classrooms. The handwriting on it was unmistakable, bringing back a flood of memories. To Michael, "You don't have to worry about Mom anymore. This house, the money. Surely these aren't things you need anymore, right? I only tried to be the best mother I could till the end. The key is in that usual spot. Love, Mom." He stood there for a while, unable to move. In his hand was an envelope from St. Jude's Hospital, where his mother had spent her final days. Inside were documents, her death certificate, along with a picture capturing her gentle smile as if she were merely asleep, along with a timestamp of 3:17 a.m. Michael found himself trembling slightly as he searched for the key's hiding spot, a place he knew well yet wished he hadn't had to remember now. Slowly, he opened the door and stepped inside, nostalgia and grief intertwining as he entered. The interior was much the same as it had always been. The scent of the wooden floors, the familiar stains on the walls, a small vase of flowers she kept next to what used to be an altar of remembrance for their family. Everything felt different now, as though the air itself whispered secrets of the past. As he made his way through the entryway and into what had been the living room, his gaze fell on an envelope resting on a small table. It was marked, "Copy of my will," and was signed by Evelyn Anderson. Inside, he read his mother's last instructions: $35,000 in savings, donated to a local children's shelter, the Connecticut home and its surrounding property, gifted to the same facility. Personal possessions and household items, free to be disposed of as seen fit. Michael sank down into a chair, overwhelmed. Each breath felt like a struggle against a wave of emotions, a mix of shock, remorse, and a regret that pierced deeper than anything he had ever known. Why now? Why like this? Mom. Then nearby, resting delicately next to what was once the altar, lay a worn-out photo album. Tucked into the last page was a note he'd never seen before. "The key is in the attic. Remember the secret?" He remembered. As a child, he'd been punished for mischief, leading his mom to keep the key hidden in that particular spot. Behind a wardrobe door, atop an old wooden box, Michael found what he was looking for. Inside the box were stacks of carefully kept envelopes and a single notebook. The envelopes were labeled meticulously with college fund, medical expenses, emergency only, revealing the depth of care his mother had taken over the years. Filled with balances and figures, they told a story of sacrifice and quiet love. On the notebook's cover, a stark yet poignant inscription read, "For Michael." He opened it, each page revealing a snapshot of his life from childhood. Drawings to copies of report cards, annotated lovingly in Evelyn's handwriting. "You did great at the track meet. First solo trip, you came back safe, thank goodness. I'll never forget the joy on your face when you got accepted into college." Each turn of the page brought an illusion of his mother's lingering presence, etched into every corner of this home. Finally, he encountered one more photograph taped to the last page. It captured a young Michael lying in a hospital bed, a momentarily weak yet resilient Evelyn Anderson smiling softly beside him. On the back, she had written, "March 15, 2010, kidney donation surgery completed. To protect Michael's life once more." standing there, surrounded by remnants of a love so profound. Michael understood what he must do. With his heart full and an almost spiritual clarity, he knew he needed to honor her legacy and open a cafe in her memory, a sanctuary for those seeking solace, named simply Evelyn's Haven. The world around Jason blurred, tears clouding his vision. He didn't want to accept it. He wished he hadn't realized it. But this was the reality of his mother's life, a life of sacrifice and dedication that remained unseen and unacknowledged by anyone else. Jason knelt trembling before a small, sacred corner he had arranged in his apartment, a humble space meant to honor his mother's memory, and bowed deeply. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I knew nothing. I never tried to understand. And now, I've done something irreversible." In the house where she had always believed in him and loved him to the end, Jason finally comprehended what it truly meant to have neglected one's parents. The spring in Hartford was still quite brisk. It was on the afternoon of March 17th, 2025, when Jason Anderson found himself opening the door to his childhood home. The moment he stepped inside, the familiar, musty scent of an unused room greeted him, a scent laced with the echoes of his past. In a corner of the room lay a large cardboard box, dusty and forgotten. Scribbled on its side, in his mother Evelyn's small handwriting, were the words, "Important." For Jason. As he carefully opened the lid, Jason was met with a neatly stacked pile of old notebooks. Each one was handwritten by his mother, Evelyn Anderson. Each cover was labeled with a different year. Titles like Jason, age 5, and Jason, sophomore year. Over 20 volumes, all lovingly preserved. Opening one notebook, Jason read his mother's tender words. Jason went on his first field trip today with his kindergarten. I struggled with the egg rolls, but he told me they were delicious with a smile. On another page, she wrote about his high school entrance exams. On exam day, Jason skipped breakfast. I guess he was nervous. When he came home and said he passed, I secretly cried in the kitchen. Every word reverberated in Jason's soul, like the steady beat of his mother's heart. With shaky hands, Jason found an envelope nestled between the pages of a notebook. Inside was a stack of papers titled Medical Expense Receipts. Among them was one receipt that stood out. July 14, 2010, hospitalization and medical treatment to $1,000 approx. It was from the hospital where Jason was admitted when he was 15. That time, was it really that serious? He was speechless. Back then, he thought it was just a cold. But in reality, he had severe pneumonia. And his mother had somehow managed to cover the treatment expenses. On the back of the receipt, his mother's hurried yet heartfelt note read, "I took a loan, but nothing is more important than Jason's life." Jason crumbled, overcome with emotion. Ooh, what have I been doing? At the bottom of the box, there was a small tin can. When he opened it, he found it stuffed with old holiday envelopes. Each was marked with something like 2000 New Year 10 and preserved untouched. Beneath them was a note. "These are for Jason's educational expenses. May they someday help empower him." His tears flowed unceasingly. Even the money he assumed had already been spent. His mother had quietly set aside for a future that now was a memory. Then, from the faintly glowing corner of the attic wall, written in chalk, a message awaited. Almost faded yet unmistakably present, it read, "No matter where you face, my heart is always with you." Upon discovering this, Jason cried out aloud, the tears unable to be held back any longer. I remembered. When I was a little child and caught a fever at night, crying and screaming, there was always a gentle hand rubbing my back without saying anything. When I was disappointed after failing an exam, my mother would quietly smile at me while making my favorite curry in the kitchen. Those days, none of it was ever a given. Everything was, in fact, the very essence of a life that one human, my mother, constantly offered to protect me. Mark sat there in front of the family altar with his knees folded neatly, bowing deeply as he whispered with gratitude, "Mom, thank you. I feel like I finally found you again." April 2025, in a small town in Connecticut where the cherry blossoms had begun to subtly fade, there was a small yet meaningful change. At the center of this change was Mark Yamada. He decided to part ways with his upscale New York City apartment. He sold his sprawling estate, which covered more than 100 acres. The sale yielded approximately $600,000, and every penny was donated to the children's home to which his mother, Evelyn Yamada, had already contributed. Though the news appeared only in the tiny corners of local newspapers, to the staff and children at the home, it was a door to the future that had swung open. By the end of that month, in proximity to his mother's home, a small, wooden, warmly welcoming cafe opened its doors. Its name was Evelyn's. On a plaque at the entry, the words were inscribed, "May this place be a homecoming for anyone who needs it." Behind the counter, alongside a cherished photograph of Mrs. Corder's, Evelyn, there hung a small framed note bearing a succinct sentence. "The greatest woman in the world. Someone who, without saying anything, taught me everything in the end." Every Sunday, children from the nearby childcare facility have begun to visit the cafe. Mark took on the role in the kitchen, trying time and again to recreate the taste of the miso soup his mother used to make. "My mom used to mix a little ground sesame into the miso, so it was easier for the kids to eat." Realized it long after the fact, he would tell the children such stories, crafting each bowl with care and love. One day, a young boy asked him earnestly, "Who's this Evelyn the cafe's named after?" Mark bowed his head for just a moment, then looked up with a gentle smile and responded, "Someone very important. Someone whom I didn't cherish nearly enough when I had the chance." The boy thought about it for a moment and then said with a straight gaze, "Then you should take care of them now." In that moment, somewhere deep within, Mark felt as if he could hear his mother let out a small chuckle. After that day, Mark began regularly visiting his mother's grave along with the children. They would offer flowers, leave a can of coffee at the gravesite, and sometimes place the children's drawings beside the headstone. "Mom, today one of the kids got a perfect score on a test. Mom, I've memorized a new recipe. I'm teaching them just like you did." No matter how late these updates came, Mark never missed a single visit, because to him, these all but too late conversations were his last gift to his mother. And then, one spring afternoon, on the cafe's wall, a newly placed blackboard posed a question: "Who is the most important person to you right now?" Next to the question, another line was added: "If you knew you couldn't see them tomorrow, what would you say today?" To the viewers, are you holding off on showing your appreciation to that one person you truly must cherish? Are we ignoring the nagging words of our parents or their requests, however small, not realizing all those years of love they represent? If tomorrow were your last day, who would you talk to and what would you say? Share your true feelings in the comments below. We value every message and will read them all carefully. In America, the bond between parents and children is often portrayed with love and gratitude, but it can also be misunderstood or neglected. Sometimes, we forget that behind every stern word or small favor, our parents harbored decades of nurturing love. Imagine tomorrow being your last. Whom would you call, and what heartfelt words would you convey? Would you reach out to reconcile past misunderstandings or express gratitude that went unsaid? Reflect on this. Have you ever brushed aside a parent's concern, not acknowledging the lifetime of care beneath it? Are you delaying appreciation, assuming there's always more time? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. We cherish these stories and the opportunity to read your honest emotions. Every voice is important, and your words might remind someone else to make that call. Write that letter or mend that connection. Let's remember the small gestures of love we often overlook, turning them into moments that can bring peace and understanding to our lives, and to those who have given so much to see us thrive. Hold dear those chances to say what matters most, because time with our loved ones is both precious and fleeting.